Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an Airbus pilot, and in today's video I will show you how to fly an RNAV approach completely realistically with the FlyByWire A320. Now, completely realistic does not only mean using an alternate method of complying with the approach, but it means that this is actually done regularly in the real airplane as well. Now, as you know, FlyByWire has currently not implemented the final approach mode, and therefore we need to use the FPA mode for the descent. And that is completely realistic. Let me show you an OEB from Airbus telling you to do exactly that. And here it is. This is OEB 30 issue 2 from the Airbus A330 fleet, but for the 320 there is a similar OEB available as well. This does affect only some Airbuses and not all of them, depending on the FMS version that is installed in the airplane. Now this basically warns you of incorrect vertical profile during non-precision approaches. You can see that there is no associated ECAM entry, and for the procedure we need to decide if our operator has established a list of affected non-precision approaches, which is updated with the current NAV database cycle. Now, since in Flight Simulator we don't have an operator that would establish a list like this, we need to choose the second option. Now, when we do that, we need to check if the procedure contains both 2 or more FPAs displayed between the descent point and missed approach or runway point, etc., and an at or above altitude constraints coded at the final approach fix. Now, if both are contained in the procedure, do not use vertical management guidance final approach, do not use LNAV VNAV minimums, and disregard the VDEF symbol. Now, we will go for the latter option over here, and when we do that, we are no longer allowed to use the final approach mode on the final approach. And that means we need to comply for the RNAV approach by flying it as a 2D approach. Now, here's what the Airbus AFCOM tells us for the 2D approach. It's basically approach flown with NAV or localizer guidance and using the FPA mode of the Airbus autopilot. Now, there's certain minimum requirements to be able to do this. For example, we need to have high NAV accuracy, and we need to have an early stabilized approach. Now, let's go ahead and have a look into a couple of the requirements we have in the descent preparation. Now, first of all, we are going to check on the progress page that the NAV accuracy is indeed showing high. Then we are going to enter our landing runway. In our case today, that's going to be Heraklion, runway 27, so that we got the distance to the runway, which is often used by the approach chart for vertical track management, as you can see over here. Now, from there on, we got a couple things to take care of. First of all, we got to review our go-around strategy, especially in case of degraded navigation. When passing through 10,000, we once again check that we've got high accuracy, and then for the final approach, we are going to use the NAV mode. 0.3 nautical miles prior to the final descent point, we are going to pre-select the target flight path angle, and prior to that select the bird mode, and then pull the FPA selector so that the aircraft is going to start the descent. From there on, we are going to monitor our flight parameters simply by cross-checking with the approach chart over here. Now, for our approach today, we are going to fly the RMP-27 into Heraklion in Greece. When planning on an RNAV approach using FPA mode, you need to use an LNAV minima. If there was LPV or LNAV VNAV published, you cannot use that. You can only use LNAV, because you don't have VNAV guidance for the approach. Now, for today's approach, we're going to start at bases over here in 6,000 feet. And as you can see, we got bases in here, and that one's at 6,000 feet or above. From there on, we proceed to India Romeo 401, max 185 knots, and above 2,300 feet, which we got over here. And then we proceed to India Romeo 400, which is our final approach fix at 2,000 feet. So here we got India Romeo 400 at 2,000 feet. Now, by the time we reach India Romeo 400, we want to be established in landing configuration and at 2,000 feet altitude. A mile prior to this one, we are going to pre-select our target FPA, which in case of this approach is going to be 3.4 degrees, and 0.3 miles prior to India Romeo 400 we are going to pull the FPA selector in order to start our descent. So that's about how you do it. And then on the way down, you cross-check your distances to the runway threshold on the progress page with the altitude we have indicated over here. Okay, that much about the theory of flying an approach like this. Let's have a look at how that looks like in practice. We are already at 6,000, which is the minimum altitude across bases, and thereafter we are going to initiate our descent towards, at first, 2,300 feet, and later on then 2,000 feet to start the approach. Apart from that, we do aim for an early stabilized approach. Now the Airbus is perfectly capable of flying that approach as a decelerated approach. However, in the real world, the airplane does tend to slightly miss the target for the vertical speed or for the flight path angle when you are flying it while decelerating, or accelerating for that matter of fact. So flying this one as early stabilized is a good idea. Now early stabilized, for those of you who are not familiar with the Airbus terms too much, means that you are basically in landing configuration by the time you pass the final approach phase. Okay, so now it's fully up to us. We are completely going to ignore the VNAV data down there, and we got to make sure that our aircraft is correctly configured in the landing configuration, latest a mile prior to India Romeo 400. So for that we might need to use the speed brake. Basically we just have to help ourselves getting our airplane down the way we want it to. Okay, flaps 1, let's get ourselves a little bit of margin here. I'll go select speed, full speed brake, just to get down over here to the India Romeo 401 and meet our altitude target. Now at this point you could already complete the approach checklist and later on then the landing checklist. Now what's important over here is to understand a couple of things Airbus. First of all, if you are level at altitude and you pull the FPA selector or the vertical speed selector, the Airbus is going to go into vertical speed or FPA as appropriate. It is not going to maintain the altitude selected like a Boeing would, for example. So that's one of the differences. Likewise, this means if you decide for a go-around shortly thereafter, make sure the thing actually levels off. Also, we need to understand that since we're descending below the FCU selected altitude, that thing is going to fly us right into the ground. That's very important over here. Very important indeed. So you don't have protection keeping you at the minimums or anything the likes. Now, for the landing itself, we have to turn off the flight directors, and we're on bird anyway, so then the runway track is going to be shown automatically on the FCU if you did everything right. If not, you might have to set it manually. Okay then, so we are slowing down, we got 5 miles to run, we are losing our speed, and we can see our lovely level off symbol is going to be right in front of waypoint 400. Now it's coming ahead a little bit. This thing is constantly recalculating itself, so don't worry about that. Okay then.
2,500.
Checked. So after 400 we can continue our descent, and we can slowly start to configure for the approach. Let's go flaps 2. Now we're passing 401 above 2,300 feet. That's perfect, so let's descend 2,000 feet, and from there we're going to start the approach. Gear down. Flaps 3. And that's our final approach configuration. Okay, so we are basically all configured now. Few things. We want to make sure that we're in alt mode by the time we reach 1 nautical mile. So we might have to help the airplane manually with that a little bit. But let's see, it should do it automatically just about right. Okay, so speed alt star. Now let's switch over to the bird. Alt. Okay, 1 mile prior to the final approach phase. Let's pre-select our target FPA, which is going to be minus 3.4. Don't pre-select it too early. This is only safe for 45 seconds in there. And now when we're 0.3 miles prior to India Romeo 400, we are going to pull the FPA selector in order to initiate the descent. So now. Okay, FPA minus 3.4. Set the go-around altitude. We'll just take 5,000 over there. Now we can do our distance to altitude checks. 5 miles from the runway, 1,940. And if you look at that, precisely where we're supposed to be. At 4 miles, we're looking at 1,580. So like that, we are simply monitoring our descent now. Let's quickly tell the cabin to sit down. Landing checklist, ECA memo, landing no blue, landing checklist complete. Okay. 4 miles from the runway, 1,600, and we're supposed to be in 1,580, so we're still spot on. Now, if you don't have the landing runway up here, then you can always use the progress page that you've got down here, where you've got your distance to the runway as well, as we entered that earlier on. So 3 nautical miles is going to be next, and where is my chart? Here it is. So 3 miles, 1,220. And we were pretty much spot on for that. Next up, 2 miles, 860, and so on. Now, just a quick word over here. Just a quick word, if you were to lose your profile slightly, make positive corrections, but not excessive ones. So let's say you were a couple of feet too high, then you just go, say, for example, 3.7, minus 3.7, depending on how strong the deviation is. Now, that's really all there is about for this. So we are now fully on profile. We can see the puppy, it's showing 3 whites. So when we are clearly visual with the runway, we can turn the autopilot off, flight directors off, and runway track is set.
400.
Alright, and that's everything there is to it. That is how you do fly an RNAV approach in 2D in the real world, as well as in the simulator. As you can see, works perfectly fine when you follow the correct procedure. The most important thing there is that you start your descent early enough and that your airplane is fully configured for landing.
40, 30, 20, retard. 5.
Okay, spoilers, reverse green, decel. Alright guys, and that is all there is to it. So again, most important points, 1 mile prior to the final approach fix, you need to select your target FPA. 0.3 nautical miles prior to the final approach fix, you are going to pull the FPA selector so that the airplane is going to initiate the descent. And then use the distance to altitude table provided on the approach chart in order to confirm your altitude. And that is exactly how you would fly an approach like this in an Airbus A320 that was equipped with that FMS software that triggers the OEB 30. Now, I've personally flown quite a couple of approaches already in the Airbus A330 using exactly this technique, because the approach that we were to fly was actually listed on the list of NPAs that my operator has established that we must not fly. So, as you can tell, this does happen in the real world. This is not unrealistic at all, and especially when flying to lots of airports that do feature non-precision approaches, you are rather likely to see something like that happen to you every now and then, like maybe every, I don't know, once a month, twice a month, or something the likes, depending on how much you fly and to which kind of places. So this absolutely happens in the real world. This is a legitimate way from the Airbus Flight Crew Operations Manual on how to fly a non-precision approach, called a 2D approach in that case, because you only have lateral guidance available, but not vertical guidance. So you do the vertical yourself using FPA mode. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, do let me know in the comments below. And if you really liked it, then be sure to leave a like in YouTube as well, as it does help out the channel. Finally, if you really like what I'm doing, don't forget to subscribe. And if you absolutely love what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.